This was the moment everything could end before it truly began. Not after years of conquest. Not at the height of power, but here, at a river, after crossing into Asia. Alexander the Great had moved fast, deeper than many expected, but speed alone does not win wars. Eventually, someone stops you. And this time, someone did, waiting on the far side of the Granicus River that stood the first real defense of the Achaemenid Empire. Not the full might of the empire, but enough to test him. Persian commanders, acting under the authority of Darius III, had chosen their ground carefully. They would not chase him. They would not scatter. They would stop him here, because if they could break his army at the edge of Asia, the invasion would end before it truly began. On one side of the river stood a system that had ruled for centuries. On the other side, a young king who had only just begun, and between them, water, a barrier that could protect or destroy. This was not just a battle. This was a test. If he failed here, everything would collapse. If he won, everything would change. The battlefield was not chosen by accident. The Persian forces had positioned themselves along the far bank of the Granicus River. From this position, they held the advantage. The ground rose slightly on their side, giving them a clear view of the approaching Macedonian army. More importantly, the river itself created a natural obstacle for Alexander the Great. This meant one thing: to reach the enemy, he had to cross under pressure. River crossings in battle are among the most dangerous operations an army can attempt. Soldiers lose formation in water, movement slows, coordination breaks down, and at that exact moment, they are most vulnerable. The Persians understood this. Their forces, composed largely of cavalry supported by infantry, were positioned to strike the moment the Macedonians attempted to cross. They did not need to attack first. They only needed to wait. Wait for the enemy to weaken itself. Wait for the moment when organization turned into chaos, and then strike. From their perspective, the plan was simple. Let the river do the work. But on the opposite side, the Macedonian army stood ready, disciplined, experienced, used to fighting in difficult conditions. Yet even for them, this situation was dangerous. They were being asked to attack into a defensive position across water against a prepared enemy. Every advantage belonged to the Persians: terrain, position, timing. Everything except one factor: leadership. At this moment, Alexander the Great faced a choice that would define not just the battle, but the entire campaign. He could wait, scout for a better crossing point, force the Persian army to move, reduce the risk. This was the logical decision, the safe decision. But Alexander was not fighting for safety. He was fighting for momentum. Waiting would give the Persians time. Time to reinforce. Time to organize. Time to turn this defensive position into something even stronger. So he chose the opposite. He chose to attack immediately. This decision shocked his enemies, because it broke expectation. They had prepared for hesitation. Instead, they saw movement. The Macedonian army began advancing toward the river. There was no delay, no long preparation, just forward motion. This was not recklessness. It was calculated pressure. Alexander understood that speed could disrupt even the strongest defensive position. If he could force engagement before the Persians fully stabilized, he could create opportunity where none should exist. But the risk remained enormous. His soldiers would enter the river exposed. Their lines would break. Their formation would weaken. And if the initial push failed, there would be no recovery. This was the kind of decision that defines a commander: not cautious, not defensive, but decisive. The advance began. Macedonian forces moved into the water of the Granicus River, immediately encountering resistance. The river disrupted movement just as expected. Footing was unstable, lines were uneven, coordination weakened. And from the opposite bank, the Persian forces struck. Cavalry charged downward, targeting the Macedonians at their most vulnerable moment. The first phase of the battle was chaos. Combat took place in the water, at the edge of the bank, and across uneven terrain. This was not clean warfare. It was pressure, force meeting resistance at the worst possible conditions. But then, something shifted. Alexander the Great, it did not remain behind the lines. He moved forward, into the most dangerous part of the battlefield, leading the charge directly. This changed everything. His presence at the front did more than inspire his troops. It accelerated the attack. Momentum increased. Pressure intensified. But it also placed him in direct danger. At one critical moment, Alexander found himself exposed in close combat, surrounded, targeted by enemy fighters who recognized exactly who he was. The situation escalated rapidly. He was struck, nearly overwhelmed, for a brief moment. The entire campaign stood on the edge of collapse. If he fell here, in the river, in his first major battle, everything would end. But he did not fall. Support reached him. The attack continued. And as more Macedonian forces successfully crossed, the balance began to shift. Their discipline started to take effect. Their coordination returned. And slowly, the Persian defensive line began to break. Once the Persian line began to collapse, the outcome became inevitable. Alexander the Great had done what should not have been possible. He had forced a crossing under pressure and turned it into victory. The Persian forces, once holding a strong defensive position, were now retreating. What had been intended as a decisive stop became the first major defeat. The significance of this victory extended far beyond the battlefield. For the Macedonian army, it changed belief. They had faced the Persian system directly and won. For the Persians, it changed perception. This was no longer a small invading force. This was a commander capable of breaking strong positions and winning under disadvantage. The battle at the Granicus River marked a turning point. The invasion of Asia was no longer uncertain. It was successful. And from this moment forward, the conflict would escalate, because now, the empire would have to respond differently. He didn't just cross into Asia. He proved he could win there. Alexander the Great. And now, the empire will respond. Subscribe, because the next battle is where Persia finally takes him seriously.